Today is another one of those devotions that I believe is very necessary for where we are right now. For today, for the conditions that surround us, it's time to ask. It is at that point where what we need from God, don't neglect to ask. And don't look at the limitations that this pandemic has brought to us. Don't look at the limitations and think, well, I'm going to sit back and at the right time. But I want to tell you, this is the day, this is the time that we need to petition God for all of our needs, whatever they might be. Reading in John 16 and verse 16 through 24, Jesus said, "A little while, and you will not see me. And again, a little while, and you will see me, because I go to the Father." Then some of his disciples said among themselves, "What is this that he says to us? A little while, and you will not see me, and again a little while, and you will see me, and because I go to the Father." They said, therefore, "What is this that he says, a little while? We do not know what he's saying." Now Jesus knew that they desired to ask him, and he said to them, "Are you inquiring among yourselves about what I said, a little while, and you will not see me, and again a little while, and you will see me? Most assuredly, I say to you that you will weep and lament, but the world will rejoice. And you'll be sorrowful, but your sorrow will be turned into joy. A woman, when she's in labor, has sorrow because her hour has come. But as soon as she has given birth to that child, she no longer remembers the anguish for joy that a human being has been born into the world. Therefore, you now have sorrow, but I will see you again, and your heart will rejoice, and your joy no one will take away from you. And in that day you will ask me nothing. Most assuredly, I say to you, whatever you ask the Father in my name, he will give it to you. Until now you have asked nothing in my name. Ask, and you will receive, that your joy may be full." So your asking is directly connected to your joy, and your joy is connected to your asking. And if you want to have joy, he says it's just about your asking. You got to get involved in requesting what you need. Until now, he said, you've asked nothing in my name. They didn't need to. He was there. He's the one that fed the 5,000 and the 4,000. He's the one that walked on water. They didn't need to ask. He was in their presence, but he's saying, this next phase, and that's the phase we live in. He said, this next phase is going to be one where you're going to have to learn to ask what you need, and it's going to be done. Until now, he said, you've asked nothing in my name. To this point, Jesus was very personally involved with his disciples. His hands were on them, and he was teaching them day by day. But, you know, when the King of Kings is in your company, what more do you need? When the great provider, creator is next to you, what more could you ask for? But think about it. When you have his presence, everything else pales in comparison to the presence of God. Nothing compares to walking with him. But he wasn't condemning them here for not asking. He was simply stating that things are certainly going to be different very soon. They needed to start asking for the things they needed and to exercise their faith, rather than just watching him feed the thousands and watching him walk on water. Now they were going to have to pray to a God that was invisible, but they would have to ask in faith, believing, and ask in his name. The framework of this gospel was being formed during this time, this gospel that we preach and that we believe in today. And, you know, there were years of learning and growing with the Lord, and they saw the miracles, the signs and wonders, and all the things that he did. But now they were about to turn a corner, and it was going to be necessary for both the gospel message and for their own foundation, which was also the base of the church we're a part of. And at the foundation of this church, there is this process in the economy of God that he has said to them, and he says to us through that word, you've got to learn to ask. And if you need something, you need to ask it in my name, and I will do it. And there's a purpose in this. It's not just so we can be excited and love God and stay in the church, but it's necessary for our very spiritual survival. Matthew 10 and 16 through 20, behold, he was telling his disciples, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore, be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But be aware of men, for they will deliver you up to councils and scourge you in their synagogues. You'll be brought before the governors and kings for my sake, as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. But when they deliver you up, do not worry about how or what you should speak, for it will be given to you in that hour what you should speak. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father who speaks in you. Until now, he said, until now. Looking back, we can all see where we might have failed to take advantage of some opportunities, and we went through a valley, went through a tough time, and we might have been so busy crying and trying to get sympathy and lamenting our problem, we may have forgot to ask. We may have forgot to stand still and say, wait a minute, I might be entering into a valley. I might be going downhill. But we forgot that if we call on his name, he could turn us around immediately. And suddenly the dark turns to day. And circumstances come to us, and we almost think that the script has already been written. And because we're going into something that's a little bit dark, then we think tomorrow's going to be really dark. And let me give you a testimony. Many times I have seen the beginning of what looked like a long drawn out trial. And I could see the beginnings of it. I could see where it was headed. And I would go into my closet of prayer and I would say, God, I want to stop this right now. Now, there are things we do have to go through, but I have seen God take a situation and completely reverse it, turn it on its axis. And the next day was a completely different set of circumstances because I remembered to ask. This works because this draws you closer to God. It develops your faith and you become a testimony and you can help others and tell others about this. He was saying up to this point, he said, you've had very little need to ask because, well, I've been right here with you. And there was a closeness that provided, the shelter from storms, food, teachings, many positive proofs of their decision to leave everything and follow him. And that Jesus was certainly God in the flesh. They realized this. But this next level that they were about to be ushered into, this is where we live today. This is very important because Jesus was telling them that the future would require them to have faith in the unseen. You're going to have to believe me when I'm not there. You're going to be in a storm on a boat again, and I'm not going to be there. As we know, the Apostle Paul, he said, I was a disciple, born out of the seas, and I came later. But he proved these words as he was on that ship for 3 weeks. And the angel of the Lord spoke to him, and he was able to comfort those men on the ship, 276 souls. And he said, we're all going to be saved. He said, but the ship's going to be lost. How can the ship be lost, but we're going to be saved? And it happened as the ship ran aground and the waves tore it apart. And the Bible said some on boards and some on pieces of the ship. Those who couldn't swim made it all safely to land. But here the Apostle Paul is taking what Jesus is telling the disciples, and he's living proof of that what he asked, the Lord was able to do. We can either fight about what we don't have and be disappointed, or we can ask for it in his name. In that day, he said, in that day. But see, this is that day. And this is the day that the Lord has made. We are in that day. We are where he was telling the disciples they were going to be. And it's the time following the resurrection and the day of Pentecost. And there's two ways this word ask is to be used. One is to ask as an inquiry. But the other is to say, God, I'm asking for your assistance. He can answer your questions and he can provide the answer. He can provide the money. He can provide the healing. He can provide the peace. He can provide the comfort. It's all the same to God. He can give you a verbal answer in his word, or he can give you the physical answer that you need. Until now. See, that speaks of a time for change. And they came to this point in change. And when people come to the church, they come to the Lord and maybe they're a new convert. And there's a season there where it's floating along real nice. And they're in love with it. The excitement is real and the newness of it is great. But that baby in Christ has to come to that place, and they have to learn it. And they might learn it in church, they may learn it in a sermon, they may learn it, but they're going to learn it personally. There's a point where they have to learn to ask. But at the very same time, we can also, in times of plenty, can forget that this is a relationship based on asking. We've got to remember to ask. I've found myself in predicaments and looked around and which way do I turn? Why is everything like this happening to me? And I forget that one small, very important detail. I forgot to ask. He said, if you haven't asked anything in his name, well, you need to start. And if you haven't asked anything, we need to do so today. What's out of order in your life? What is it that you could change? Are you completely content? You know, we leave ourselves unprotected by the knowledge of God's power and goodness. And if you haven't asked him anything, we leave ourselves unprotected. We don't have the current proofs. Testimonies are great, but we need to have fresh testimonies. We need to have fresh victories that God has blessed us with. We need to have something recent. And if you're not going through something, you may be about to go through something. And I want to encourage you, don't forget to ask. And, you know, I'll say more about this but we're in a day right now where the weak are getting weaker and the strong are getting stronger. And I'll deal with this in other sermons, I'm sure, in Bible studies. But right now, going through this pandemic, there are people that, you know, those of you watching, you're on the good side. You're doing everything you can to equip yourself. But unfortunately, there's also those that are fading quickly. And, you know, they're fading. And you know, this is not something I'm guessing. These are things that we know about because they have not disciplined themselves to fill in that gap between the empty spaces. You know, really what it comes down to, they just stopped asking God. They stopped asking God for his direction. They stopped going to him in prayer every day. I can promise you, when people are fading, they're not praying. And when they're fading, they're trying to make their own way. See, we can survive for a while off of last year's blessings, last month's blessings. But there's a point where we've got to ask for ourselves today. We've got to ask. Some of the weak ones are realizing that they're drifting away. And they're waking up and they're calling on his name. I believe that. Matthew 7 through 11, I come to a close. Ask and it will be given you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. And he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. Or what man is there among you who, if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will he give him a serpent? Don't ever settle for the serpent. Don't settle for those situations that seem just terrible and mean. Like, how can this happen to me? No, don't settle for that. Go back to God and ask. He said, if you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those that ask him? How much more will he give good things? In my last scripture, John 16 and 24, he said, until now you've asked nothing in my name. Ask and you will receive, that your joy may be full. Well, I pray today that either your joy is full or you've got everything you need today to make your joy full. I believe God has blessings in store for every single one of us if we would just ask.